Welcome and thank you for checking in at the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change. My guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable effective and sustainable change in the workplace. My name is Ali Jama, and you're listening to the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Simon Banks, an international keynote speaker on creativity, innovation, and design. With over 2 decades in the field, Simon discusses the power of visual communication as a key pillar to help communicate and simplify change in the workplace. I am grateful to have Simon sharing his knowledge and insight with me today. So Simon, thank you so much for your time. I am grateful that you're joining the Inner Game of Change podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, really happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Very excited about our podcast conversation today. We are going to talk about how to make change visual. But before we get into this exciting topic, would you mind give us introduce yourself to our listeners, Simon?
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, look, when I introduce myself, I say I'm a keynote speaker, author, and podcaster on creativity, innovation, and design, and a recovering professional artist. Now, the recovering professional artist piece is probably relevant here in I studied fine arts and exhibited professionally for 5 or 6 years, and really enjoyed that as well. But that's, I guess, where my interest in visual learning, visual storytelling, the power of visuals kicked off.
Fantastic. And what sort of projects and industries you've been involved in over the years, Simon?
Well, look, I've delivered about 1,300 events across the globe. And one of my friends laughed and he said, well, that seems a lot, but, 20 years, 50 events a year or something like that. So it's not, I'm showing my age there. It's not as many as it seems. But look, I do a huge amount of different things, and it's everything from keynotes and conferences and events through to things like design sprints, co-design programs, strategic initiatives as well. So I'll give you just a couple of examples. There's a large global construction company. I design, develop, and deliver their innovation week for their leaders program, which you apply to be on, where we teach and develop those innovation skills, mindsets, behaviors, and we work on a real project over the week. A couple of years back, I worked with a super company in Australia to help co-design and co-develop their future story and what that wanted to look like, and most importantly, how to bring that to life visually. Now, I worked with a company, a charity last year, and we reimagined what a brochure could look like. Instead of that, I guess that traditional one with black and white photos, and they're all being brought off the same library bank, we sort of reimagined, redesigned, and redeveloped what a brochure could look like using a human-centered design process. I've done things like, which I guess we'll tie in a little bit today, taught people from, say, the Department of Innovation, Federal Department of Innovation, which has now changed, how to visual storytell, so how to be able to draw to connect with all the people they work with, run design sprints across a whole bunch of different sectors where we bring products and services and new ideas to life, and also speak at a bunch of conferences and MC events as well. So look, there's a big overview. And I've always thought, when you do, people say, well, you need to work out who your personas are and how they come into your business and how to the ideal client. And I've always thought, well, God, they're so different. I don't even know how to connect them all. But then last year I thought, well, probably the key thing which connects them is to help them to reimagine what they're doing and reimagine what's possible. And that's where I bring in all those skills from that background in the arts to help them to do that.
Fantastic. An all-rounder, that's what they call you in cricket, don't they?
Yeah, I guess a little bit like that. You probably imagine it's the same thing. People approach you and say, hey, can you help us out with this?
Yes.
And you've previously thought, well, hang on, maybe I don't do that, but yeah, I'd like to try that. So I guess the list of what you do expands, but that key thing, it's always in that space of, creativity, innovation, and design. But always, I guess, the key thing that connects them from, strategy through to a product to help them to reimagine and rethink what's possible in that space.
So basically what you're trying to do is how to get a message across more effectively through different practices, whether you're going to call it reimagining things, and isn't that right?
Yeah, well, if it's a message, absolutely. And I'll give you an example of strategy. When we do a strategy, think of how strategy is normally presented.
Mm-hmm.
It will be a bunch of PowerPoint squares. Doesn't mean what's in the strategy is wrong. It's just the way it's presented. And if you're lucky, you'll get a few arrows pointing downwards.
And a pyramid,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, and so they'll say, here's our strategy. Are you guys excited by that? And everyone looks and goes, that's sort of 50-50. So when we reimagine that strategy, I'll say, well, let's reimagine how we could tell that strategy or share that strategy, or what that strategy could look like if we took it out of that PowerPoint into a way that our brain loves. So with the messaging, absolutely help people get to reimagine that story in the messaging.
We're going to touch on that point, actually, how through visual capability or actually presenting information, how you can look at the old information in a new way. And therefore, there's a likelihood that you're going to comprehend the message even more. But in general, let's just get into the topic and dive deep into it. Why is it more effective to have a visual message than a written word?
Well, I wouldn't say... I'd reframe it. Because people might say, well, I love reading. Absolutely.
Of course, yes.
A word or a picture. Yeah. It's around the right time and the place to use those visual metaphors. And think about, you're driving down the road and you see road signs, and you might see that one with the swerving lines and a car in front of it. So straight away we go, okay, I know it's a slippery road ahead. I need to slow down. So we get that in 1/10 of a second. There isn't a slide. There isn't a sign which says, please, as you drive along this road, be careful. The road may be slippery, so please slow down to look after you and your family. So it's the right time and the place for that visual messaging. But what's happening is the world around us is, as you know, the world around us is changing rapidly, because this is called the inner game of change. And one of those key ways it's changing is we're taking in more information than ever before. Think about when we're probably aging ourselves a little bit. When we were younger, you get a letter from a friend. Ooh, exciting. This is great. Or someone would call before the time of mobile phones. Great, I've got a message. I'm going to put some time into this. And now we get how many emails a day? 500, 600, 700. Some people get, I know, in large organizations. So the amount of messaging we get is more than ever before. We're in an information deluge. So the way we like to take in that information is changing rapidly. And a way to think about it is our brain likes interesting things. Yeah. So if you're not creating an interesting thing with your messaging, which can be words as well, you're competing against all the rest of that noise. And I read the other day that we get over 3,000 marketing messages a day. So you're competing with that, which is why a visual or a story or a visual story can make a big difference.
Well, that's fantastic. That makes it, the way I look at it, what you're talking about here is that, especially about the road signs, and I was thinking about this morning as well, it gives me, because of our safety, so the speed of transferring the information to me to help me make a decision is what the image serves. There's a lot of work that is done in the neuroscience. How do our brains interpret visuals? Is it easier for us to comprehend a visual message than a written text?
Yeah, well, again, yes and no, but I guess think around this. I've always known that we always say, pictures worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
Our brain loves visuals, and think around all the indigenous cultures around the world, the ones I've experienced through travel and my own study. They all record their stories, and they do it through dance, and they do it through song, and they do it through visuals. Okay, and this has been going since the beginning of time. So it's in our blood to actually tell stories and record them visually. Like as adults in the Western world, we're horrified by most of those things. We will think, I won't. We dance and sing when we may be a little bit drunk at someone's wedding or no one's listening. But as opposed to visual storytelling, so drawing, no way, that's not for me, no way, that's I'm never going to do that.
It's kind of funny because we remember the drunk dance more than somebody giving a speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, like, a little alcohol, sort of like a liberator for creativity and,
yes.
and self-expression. But that's another discussion, I guess.
Yes.
But look, just with regards to how we take in information, and again, these figures that they change as well as our brain is, because our brain's plastic, so they're changing all the time. But it takes around 1/10 of a second to get a visual sense of a scene. So I like to read that road sign. And I was reading this morning, the neuroscientists in a study at MIT in the States say it only takes 13 milliseconds to be able to process an entire image. So the speed at which we take in that information is unbelievable, as opposed to, even if you're a speed reader, how long it takes to read that text. And what also is interesting, about 70% of our sensory receptors are in our eyes, so we take in so much of that information. And because our visual cortex sends that information to all of our brain, it actually sort of engages about 50% of our brain when we take in information visually. So the way we take in information visually, it feeds all of our senses in our brain. So it's not just often you have like, I'm a visual thinker or I'm kinesthetic or auditory. They're all interconnected, and that visual, the way we take in information is at the top of that. And as also read, the more information we get, the more we're becoming more and more visual thinkers as well.
Yes, and I also read, I think it's probably a similar article a while ago, that about 40% of our nerve fibers are attached or linked or associated with the retina, which is basically about the visual. So everything I gotta have to see. And also I was reading that the Egyptians, that's why they have in their visuals and their pictures big eyes, and the eyes are really more important. They didn't put an ear, they put an eye, because, well, they worship the eye because the eye is the representation of something grand, and unless I see, I cannot comprehend. So, I'm seeing all of those symbols in there around it. And as I mentioned to you before this started recording, we probably, through this podcast, we're not trying to, convince people of the power of making it visual. I think there's a lot of literature in there. I think we're trying to reiterate the message and the importance that making it visual is one powerful way to make a message more effective, especially nowadays in an avalanche of information every day. We are in the world of TikTok, right? Yeah, absolutely. TikTok's not Twitter. So Twitter is text, but even on Twitter, the tweets with visuals are around 80% more clickable, if that's the right way to frame it. Yeah, I was reading also the stats around men and women and which applications they go. So there are more men on YouTube's and more women on TikTok. So it's a really interesting way of looking at things and making stories visuals. How is that going to help nowadays with the e-learning culture that we're going through and remote learning? Well, it's similar principles to what we spoke about before. When you're on say e-learning, when you're looking at a screen like we are now, as you know, when you've delivered stuff and also been in the audience, there's a whole bunch of stuff around you. You're competing with attention. You've got 2 to 3 screens. You've got a bunch of different stuff going on. So your content has to be engaging. And I was trying to look for the study this morning, but around if something actually moves on the screen, how engaging that is for a brain as to opposed just even a static image again. So it's the same principles as well as if you're in any type of learning, make that content interesting, make that content engaging, but also be mindful in that e-learning space, your competition is 10 times higher than it is when you're in a room alone. So if it's not interesting, engaging, why would you even bother tuning in? And that's again from me delivering and also sitting in the audience as well. I understand that there's so much going on that can distract your attention. So you're talking about the art of storyboarding, and there are different applications that people can use to actually get the message in a visual format. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when you think about a story, and there's a psychologist, Jerome Bruner, he says when you're 22 times more likely to remember a fact that has been wrapped up in a story. So stories count. And why stories count? Because they generally have a human in them that we can connect to, or a character we can go, oh, I understand that. I can connect with it. And when we make something visual, especially with a person in it, also we get their emotion and their face and their feelings. So all of a sudden we can understand and we can connect with them and that person in that story. So a visual story, or even any type of story, because the story creates that visual in our head, is a really lovely way to engage people. And I've been lucky enough to sit in the audience at a bunch of conferences, and I've emceed a bunch of events, and you watch great keynote speakers. It's been really important for my own sort of speaking journey is they don't stand up and present to bullet points. They stand up with a picture and they go, see this lady? Gladys Knight. Well, let's talk about Gladys. Gladys is 53, and all of a sudden this story goes, so we can look at the picture and then we can listen. So it's this whole visual metaphor we start to create. And if you think around the way we retain information as well, when they teach memory, the art of memory, to become a memory champion, you think of the deck of cards and you walk around your house and you connect that card to a visual in your house. So how we even learn and retain information is in that visual way as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to touch on that the visuals also can trigger emotions, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not just the comprehension of a message. It's and when we talk about change management, and I think you mentioned that also in your talk now, you want to make it exciting. Well, the idea is that if we make it exciting, that hopefully in the process, we may elicit some positive emotions from the audience. And if we do that, if we succeed at that, then there's more likelihood that there will be less resistance in the long run about the change. Am I close to something accurate?
Well, look, I don't know if I'm the change experts in the long. If there's less resistance in the long term, I might be wading into uncharted territory a little bit. But what I do know is I've done a lot of work with the change community, like teaching visual communication. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat today. Or visual storytelling skills, so the ability to be able to draw your thoughts out quickly. And one of the key things I teach is that I call the 4 faces of change, which are essentially 4 emoji faces.
Yes.
And you've got the happy face, you've got the sort of the 50%, that sort of 50% face. You've got the really unhappy face, and then you've got the shock and awe face. And even just being able to draw those 4 emotions, all of a sudden you can almost hit that full array of human feeling. And when we see them, we see something we can recognize, we can buy into and go, yeah, I can see myself there. I understand that. I understand when you talk around the flow. I understand this journey. And when you can then connect those faces to bodies and put those bodies into a story, all of a sudden people go, I get it, because I see myself there, and I can understand there's a start, a beginning, and an end. So I can start to comprehend what this change journey looks like. So I think visual storytelling in all sorts of formats is just tailor-made for the change community. And also I say tailor-made for strategy, because strategy has a beginning, a middle, and an end with things happening on the way. So if you can put that into a really simple visual and then talk to that, also people go, I can get that. I can understand it. I can see what's happening. Whether they're going to be excited by it, that might be a little bit more than I can. They might look at it and go, oh no. But at least they've got a sense and understanding of what's that like. And I think change is around making the complex simple. All great communication is around making the complex simple. And one of the advertising agencies, again, it's escaped me which one, but they said, we go by the theory, if a 6-year-old can't understand it, we don't communicate it. So that really simple change and visual storytelling in all sorts of ways, and storytelling is a really powerful part of that.
And we're not saying that the making it visual is going to be the magic wand. We're just going to say it is an effective way, and consider it at all times, because it can be entertaining. And if I get entertained by something, then there's more likelihood that I may be inclined to accept it, or to talk about it, or to be engaged in it. And I'm talking about this from a change management perspective. I've been doing this for long years. I do notice as well that making it visual, you're going to have to also be aware of the type of audience. If you're going to talk to the finance department about budgeting, details probably do matter in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. As with anything, you need to know your audience. You need to know what excites them. They do want the detail. But there's two ways to present information. There's the big picture piece. There's the big picture piece, and there's the detail piece.
Yes.
If you go straight to the detail, you can lose a lot of people. But if you present the big picture, then it shows the context for where the detail fits in. And again, to think around the way we might remember, you very rarely will remember the third bullet point on the second slide with what you during a presentation, but you will remember the stories, the overarching theme. So it's that combination of the detail with that big picture storytelling, and that big picture storytelling can be anchored really nicely by some visuals.
I think there's some research done on that. They tested written information 2 or 3 days after the event, and there was about 10% comprehension. And I think these are about 85% when they tested that on images. So again, it just validates the way we look at things and the level of comprehension.
Yeah, and the reason being they're stored in a different place. Visuals are stored in our long-term memory, and words are stored in our short-term memory. And if you think back to maybe, let's say you're sitting at home now, think back to one of those great overseas trips you've been on. Maybe one of your favourite trips, might have been with family, with loved ones. Just think back now to one of those great times. Just spend a couple of seconds, picture in your mind. What do you get? You get a picture. Mm. So you don't get the itinerary that was written down or whatever it may be. Yes. You get that visual, those multi-sensory stimulation, which feeds into that. So we might remember the sounds, the smells, but we also remember that picture from that trip. Whereas we probably won't remember the words were written when you went to the hotel on your little welcome card, or you might. But as a rule, it's that we would go to that picture place, and because pictures are involved in our long-term memory.
Is that why we remember people or remember faces more than names?
Oh, look, I'm not sure if I can 100% answer that accurately.
Sometimes we forget names, but we do remember people's faces.
That makes sense, and it's probably ties into why I can never remember anyone's name. And I always go, oh, hello, mate. I've got so many mates. So in Australia, that's okay. And look, I've also heard with that, there's a theory being people who work in the creative industries have very terrible short-term memory. And I've also read that the reason, this is going off piste a little bit, but they're always thinking of something else. So things in the short term, they don't hold any meaning for them because their mind's always off elsewhere. So I used to always blame that for my memory because I'm sort of always thinking of other ideas. Now I think it's actually because words are stored in the short-term memory. So
yes,
I like that. I like that definition.
Yeah. What are some of the tools that a change management practitioner can tap into? There's always the talk that PowerPoints are really bad. They're actually not bad. I do believe that, especially nowadays, they're really very powerful. Well, it depends on your competency in using them. But just like any other tool, what are some of the other tools, Simon, that people can look at and use to visualize their messages?
Well, I want to just touch on PowerPoint first. PowerPoint isn't the problem. What goes on the PowerPoint that is the problem.
You're right.
And we've all been in the conference when someone will stand up and they'll say, you can't see what's on this slide, but if you could. The reason being they've crammed it with so much detail. So the slide deck, which runs around the office here, have a look at our next quarterly earnings cycle, etc. Or here's the details of our last meeting. That's great to send around the office to share and then comprehend in your own time and read it, and really useful tool. It's just really poor to present with. So let's not put a bamboo stake through the heart of PowerPoint. We just need to rethink how we present that PowerPoint. And the number one rule is more picture, less text. That's the number one rule I always teach everyone: more picture, less text. And a friend of mine works in, say, the New South Wales government, and had to share a huge big change initiative that he'd been running. And for his PowerPoint, he just dragged all those, you get those sort of black and white figures.
Yeah.
I'm not sure in some part of the PowerPoint. His whole PowerPoint presentation was just those. And it went over a huge treat. And that's all he did, just because he used those simple images that are people, so everyone could go, oh, yeah, I get that. So there's great things which are available with PowerPoint. But look, some of the other tools, and look, this is, something I use all the time and I teach people to use all the time, but a texter, because with a few, and we can put some links in the show notes. I've got a bunch of YouTube videos. Everyone comes in with this mindset because when they were at school, we got given a crappy comment about our something along the lines of, oh, that doesn't look like a horse. You should try geography next year. So in that moment, and it's in my book, and I talk about this all the time, we developed what I call this creative ogre, which says, you can't draw, you're not creative, blah, blah, blah. So this sticks with us throughout our career and throughout life and goes into the workplace, which is ridiculous because in that moment, we judged on our ability to draw something incredibly hard, realistically, which takes a lot of practice and skill. And I say it's very left brain, not that we think like that anymore, but if you're in the old way of thinking, it's a very logical, analytical thing to do. So therefore we go, oh, I can't draw anymore. So we rule this out. But with a few simple tips and tricks, you can start to get your thoughts drawn out really easily. So, and why I like it is you can say, is this what you're thinking? Let me quickly reflect that back. Is that it? Oh, it's not it. What about if we added this? Oh, that's it. Okay. So for that comprehension, so the ability just to sketch out a few simple shapes and ideas and the ability to draw a person with an emotive face is a really powerful tool. Anything which shows a journey, like you might have a bunch of pre-made templates, which got, the atypical sort of, mountains or a desert, anything with a horizon line in the background, we can show there's a beginning, start, and a beginning, a start, a middle, and an end. And often you might see those, those mountain landscapes or anything like that is a nice way to depict a journey. And something which is really easy to use and people, it's free as well. You can jump on something like Canva and you can literally populate a bunch of great visuals in a matter of minutes. There's a bit of fun as well. So there's some great tools, and also your iPad is a great thing as well when you're doing online learning. You can you can draw over images you've already got, so you can take notes around an image. So instead of just taking notes in the usual way, you can literally have an image, you can draw on it, you can use your arrows and a bunch of different things. And when your screen comes alive in online learning, I couldn't find the figure for it this morning, but the level of engagement just shoots up when something on your screen is moving. And there's a great little app called Mirror Mac PC, and you can just send your iPad to your Chrome browser or your internet browser, and then it's really easy to share on Zoom. So there's a bunch of great things you can do, and I use something called the Sketches app or something like Procreate as well. We can easily draw. So there's some great tools, but even while we spoke around PowerPoint first, it's a great tool if you use it well. And generally we get stuck in, I'm going to put a little bit more information on this just to get my point across. No, it's the other way around.
Yeah. And to be honest, I am a fan of PowerPoint because I just use a lot of its capabilities that many people don't use anyway. And I keep finding different ways to present the information. When we talk about tools, that just also there's a responsibility that you're going to find the tool and you're going to train yourself on using the tool, because that will be a better way to service your clients. I use VideoScribe, which is a storyboard way of putting information. Recently, I've trained myself on Powtoon, which is a video, but you can use it with different applications like PowerPoint, just different ways. And they all have their own templates as well. I think you touched on it before, which I call novelty. So if you present your information in a novel way, chances are you're going to get more attention to that. And definitely a moving object on a screen can grab attention in there. So whilst we talk about tools, there's also the expectation that change practitioners would need to really immerse themselves to be able to use those tools effectively. When does visual not work? I think you mentioned one thing, which is don't put, bad images in there or pixelated or just poor quality. That can be one thing that can put people off.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I haven't been asked that question before. I like it. It's like with anything, the quality of what you use always says a lot about who you are as a presenter and a person.
True.
And so but there's so many great images which you can use now. And there's a really great site if you want to get some images called unsplash.com. And it's the world's leading collection of free pictures. And photographers put their pictures on there and you can use them all for free. But as with the expectation, you'll acknowledge them in your work and that type of thing as well. It's just been bought by one of those big iStock Photo or something. Now, it sounds a little bit like, you're using people's work for free. But what it's done, everyone who contributes, all of a sudden they've got a global audience looking at their work. And what I've read, so many of the photographers say, that's led on to bigger and better work for advertising brands and different things. So I know there's a bit of an idea around you shouldn't use stuff for free, but this is what it's designed for, and everyone contributes their work. So you get some really beautiful pieces on there, and that's a great spot to start to get that nice quality work. And what I would also say, if you're going to use a visual, often there'll be that, they're on iStock Photo and you've got like the diverse crowd.
Yes.
And they all look like the diverse crowd looks like every diverse crowd around the world. So, so just think with your visuals, how can I get something a little bit quirky, a little bit of humor always works well. How can I get something a little bit different? And how can I find a picture that'll fit with my message, but maybe just a little bit of the message, not the whole message. A picture doesn't always have to say everything. So if you're talking around a journey, you might have a picture of a journey in the desert, or you might have a picture of a boat on the ocean, so there might be all sorts of different ways to think about that as well. But what you said before, if the image quality isn't good, absolutely. But look, what I always tell everyone when I teach how to draw, you only need 10% realism for your audience to go, ooh, I get it. And if you draw it, all of a sudden it becomes interesting.
Yes, yeah.
So a lot of people freak out around, I'm not going to do a good job of it. But if you draw it, all of a sudden it's interesting. Your audience is going, ooh, look at that. So, I'm not sure if I answered the question well enough.
No, you did. So one of the things that I was always thinking about is, when do I cringe when I look at presentations? And one of the things is the quality of the image. The second thing, which you mentioned, is if it's a stock standard image, then I've seen it, and I didn't believe in it, so don't repeat it again. So be slightly more creative and pay attention to the way you present information. But you've already mentioned that. Make it novel, make it attractive, and make it nice. You'll feel good about your work. People will walk away feeling good about the information. Not necessarily accepting the change, but at least there's likelihood that we will sit in a neutral space to rationalize the information rather than upfront declining them.
Yeah, and look, no one ever sat in a presentation and said, you know what, I wish that had been more visually boring and unappealing, because that's me. I just like the most boring crap possible.
Yes.
I'm really annoyed that was something engaging and interesting. Like I'm literally outraged. I'm going to make a complaint about you. No one ever said it. And the same way I always say, no one ever went to an event and said, wish I had a more boring time. Like, we like to be engaged. We like to be entertained. It's like good design. Think about good design. Good design is really subtle. So we're not quite sure what we like about it, but we know that there's some elements there that are good. And it's the same thing with the way you present that information. You want to put on your designer's hat and just think, oh, is this interesting for my audience? Do I look at it and get excited by it? And I love the thing that you said, just put the stress test on yourself and think, my audience, will they remember this? Is this just another, I've got something on time management. I'm going to do something around a clip art of a clock from PowerPoint. Or do you want to have someone wringing their hair out and say, have you ever felt like this? And then we go, yeah, I understand that emotion. So I would say with change, and I always go back to it, the more human you can make that change. And so the more humanness you can put in those presentations with pictures of people, for me, that's the bit which really engages everyone. And I do some work with storytelling, and it's how do you put the human story into your boring presentation? And there's always a human story. And it's almost, if you lead with that human story, you then get the audience leaning in and go, oh, yeah, you told me about Bob in the hospital, and, oh, okay, and his journey and family wasn't well and everything's worked out. Now you can tell me the details of the hospital you're building and all the specs for the bricks and the budget, because you've led in with the story about Bob and his family. So, yeah, just make it, what's the human element in this story, and what's the level of interest? And think about it, when you go to a party, and sometimes you'll wander into a party and you'll go, ooh, energy in here's a bit poor, I might come back in an hour. Other times you walk into a party and you go, ooh, this is rocking. So there's an energy in there. So just same thing with your presentation. What's the energy like? What's the story like? What's the design features like? Be that party where everyone goes, ooh, I like what I'm feeling here. I want to hang around a little bit longer.
Fantastic. And the concept of making it a human, Simon, goes to the heart of change management. It is about the people and the impact of change on people. I also want to mention that there's actually a book written by, I can't remember the writer. There's a couple of them. It's called The Messy Middle, which talks about every project has got a beginning and an end, has got a messy middle. And I think the power of visuals can really help, and I think you already mentioned that, simplify the message and guide people through those changes. Because remember, when we introduce a change to you as an individual and as a team member, this is on top of your current job. And so we're actually presenting more information. If we don't present it in a smart way, and this is not really misleading, but it's a smart way to present information in a transparent way, then we're going to help you in the long run as an individual, because every change, I think it's 99% of all changes, are going to be good for the people in the first place. So what would be, I think you've already mentioned a couple of things for the change practitioners community: make it attractive, make it visual. Is there anything else that you would like our community to be aware of?
Just how powerful a tool it can be.
Yes.
Just how powerful, and back yourself, because I think we all, I would say 90% of the people I work with would say, but I'm not creative, Simon, and there's some story behind that. And the other 5% who say, oh yeah, I really am creative, but I never, ever show that side of me at work, ever. I just keep that secret on the side. So ignore that piece, because often that will lead us to doubt ourselves. We'll go to something which might be a little bit more bland, a little bit more in our sphere of, a way we do things. So just with the way we present information, when you get into that visual space, you start to have to be forced to make decisions you wouldn't normally, but that's okay. And being creative and trying new things is about experimenting and making mistakes. And I don't say fail fast, I say experiment quickly. So just play around with some things and you'll understand pretty quickly what the audience engages with and interacts. But look, life's trying new things and getting involved with new ideas and adding new things to your tool belt. And visual, as the science tells us, only going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. If you're not captivating your audience visually, you're already going to be on the back foot.
Fantastic. Experiment fast. Is that going to be a title of a new book for you, perhaps, in the future?
Possibly. I think the title of the new book will be Reimagine. I just have to. It's a big effort to write a book. So
of course, yes, of course. Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure if I'm primed yet for round two. I think I'll update my current book first, because that came out 3 or 4 years ago, and a lot's happened in that time. So I think I'll update that. But I really love this idea of experiment quickly, because it takes away that idea of I tried something and it didn't work, I won't do it again. Actually, we tried something, we got a bunch of feedback quickly, we didn't waste a lot of time, and now I'm going to try something else based on that.
Very quickly, what's the title of your book, Simon?
It's called 1,000 Little Light Bulbs, How to Kickstart a Culture of Innovation in Your Organization. And a little plug. The podcast is called The Occupational Philosophers, a not so serious business podcast to spark creativity, curiosity, and imagination.
How would people reach out to you, Simon?
LinkedIn's a pretty good spot. I'm about the 3rd or 4th Simon Banks. As you scroll down, we're a pretty popular name, and there's a few well-known Simon Bankses out there. Or just my website, simonbanks.com.au. Both of those are pretty good spots to say hello. And look, I do run the How to Become a Whiteboard Ninja courses twice a year for public courses as well. So there's a spot there where you can jump on a waiting list, and I'll let you know when the dates come out if you're keen to improve those visual drawn storytelling skills.
Fantastic. And we're going to put all your information on the podcast details. It's been fascinating, and I'm really grateful for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that our listeners will take away a couple of things that will add more value to their practice. I appreciate your time, Simon, and I'm pretty sure we're going to reconnect again, and perhaps next time we're going to talk more about your book in details. But until then, stay safe and stay well.
Yeah, will do. I always say at the end of our podcast, have fun, make stuff, play more. So on that, thanks for having us along. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you're just out of the change community. I know, having worked a lot in this community in a lot of ways, man, you've got a big job. So your nose against the grindstone a lot. I understand dealing with people's emotions around different things and moving people. I think it's almost like that unheralded. And I read a lot about it, like, why change matters, what we do, and, understanding how to make our project successful. I know everyone works their backsides off. So kudos to people who are in that change space and, making a real difference in the world around us as well.
Thank you so much. Until next time, stay well and stay safe. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Inner Game of Change podcast. To know more about our guests and this episode, check out the innergameofchange.com.au website. And remember to subscribe. I can't wait to share with you the next episode. Until then, stay well and stay safe.